The last sound I heard before my world changed was the crisp snap of a legal envelope being opened. My father stood at the head of my grandmother's old dining table, her will in his hands. He cleared his throat, not looking at me, and began to read. With every word, the air left the room. The sprawling family home, the investment portfolio, the life savings, all of it, every single asset, was bequeathed to one person. My older brother, Michael. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. The only thing left to me in that document was a single sentence, a footnote to my own disinheritance. And as the shock turned to a cold, silent fury, I had no idea that the real will, the one my grandmother meant for us to find, was already in motion. A second document, with a condition so specific it would dismantle my entire family's betrayal, was already on its way. My grandmother, Eleanor, wasn't just family. She was my anchor. Where my parents saw a quiet, bookish girl, she saw a curious mind. While my brother, the golden child, was off winning trophies, I was in her sunroom, learning how to identify bird calls or listening to stories about the stock market crash of '29. She was sharp, observant, and fiercely believed in fairness. But she also saw the dynamics in our house with a painful clarity. My father, her son, had always seen Michael as an extension of himself, athletic, charismatic, a real go-getter. I was the afterthought, the sensitive one. The disparity wasn't always in huge gestures. It was in the funding of Michael's private college tuition while I took loans, the down payment for his condo, the constant praise that flowed to him like a river, while my achievements were met with a polite, distant smile. Grandma Eleanor would squeeze my hand after these moments and say, "The ledger always balances, my dear. In the end, it always balances." I thought she was offering philosophical comfort. I didn't realize she was making a plan. Her death was a quiet, profound loss. At the funeral, the family grief felt partitioned. My parents and Michael formed a unit, receiving condolences as the core mourners. I floated on the periphery, the granddaughter, not quite part of the inner circle. That's when the whispers started. My father and Michael, heads bent together, talking in low, serious tones. My mother avoiding my eyes. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with grief. It was the chill of a door being quietly closed. A week after the burial, we were summoned to the old house for the reading of the will. The atmosphere was thick with a strange, anticipatory tension. My father, as the executor, had the document. There was no independent lawyer present, which I should have questioned right then. He broke the seal, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. And with each clause, the pit in my stomach opened wider. The will was brutally simple. It left her entire estate, valued at nearly $3 million, to my beloved grandson, Michael Jameson, to support his future and his family. There was a small, separate trust set up for the maintenance of the family cemetery plots. And then, for me, Clause 7. To my granddaughter, Clara, I leave the contents of my writing desk in the sunroom, in recognition of our shared moments there. That was it. A desk. A piece of furniture. While Michael inherited a fortune. The silence after he finished was absolute, then broken by a soft, choked sound from my mother. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Michael, her eyes filled with a terrible, complicit pity. Michael's face was a mask of attempted solemnity, but I saw it, the faint, quick tug at the corner of his mouth. The triumph he couldn't fully hide. My father finally looked at me. His expression wasn't one of apology or shared shock. It was one of grim, practical resolution. "Clara," he said, his voice too steady. "I know this is unexpected, but you have to understand. Your grandmother was a practical woman. Michael, he has a family. 2 kids, a mortgage. The pressure on him is immense. You're independent. You have your career. This will secure his children's future." It's what she wanted. Every word was a hammer blow. They had known. They had all known what that document would say. This wasn't a surprise to them. It was a script they were following. The meeting wasn't to hear the will. It was to manage my reaction. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed shut. The betrayal was so complete, so coldly logistical. It felt like a physical weight on my chest. I looked at Michael. Did you know? My voice was a whisper. He had the decency to look at the floor. Dad talked to me about Grandma's wishes a while ago. She was worried about my stress. She wanted to help. A while ago. The pieces crashed together. The whispers at the funeral. The closed-door meetings. They hadn't just found out today. They'd had time to absorb it, to rationalize it, to convince themselves it was right. I was the only one walking into an ambush. I stood up, the legs of my chair screeching against the hardwood. I don't believe it, I said, my voice gaining strength from a well of pure anger. I don't believe she wrote this. Not like this. My father's face hardened. Clara, don't be emotional. This is legal. This is her final wish. It's not a reflection on you. But it was. Of course it was. It was a reflection that, in the eyes of my own family, including, apparently, my grandmother, I was worth a desk. I want to see it, I demanded. The will. I want to see it for myself. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. Reluctantly, he slid the document across the table. The paper felt cold. I scanned the formal language, the legalese. It all seemed in order. It was signed, notarized, dated 2 years prior. But as I stared at the signature, her elegant, looping Eleanor, something felt off. The signature was right, but the will itself felt sterile. It lacked her voice. There was no personal message, no explanation, none of the careful nuance that defined her. It was a blunt instrument. And then I saw it. A tiny detail. In the clause about the desk, it was described as the oak writing desk in the sunroom. But my grandmother's writing desk wasn't oak. It was a cherrywood Hepplewhite reproduction, a fact she mentioned every time she polished it. A woman who knew the genus of every tree in her garden would not mistake cherry for oak. A wild, desperate hope flared in my chest. This was wrong. This document was wrong. I pushed the will back. This isn't her, I said, my voice trembling but clear. The law says it is, my father replied, his tone final. Now, please. Let's not make this harder than it is. We're all grieving. I left the house without another word. I drove aimlessly for hours, numbness slowly giving way to a searing sense of injustice. I called the only person I could think of, my friend Sarah, a paralegal. Through tears, I told her everything. The will, the desk, the oak versus cherry. She was quiet for a moment. Clara, a mistake like that in a legal document, it's a red flag. A huge one. But contesting a will is a war. It's expensive, it's public, and it tears families apart forever. You need more than a wrong type of wood. You need proof. Another document, a later amendment, something. Where would I even start? I asked, feeling hopeless. Start with the desk, Sarah said. She left it to you. Go get it. Maybe she left you more than just furniture. The envelope felt alien in my hands, a silent, weighty secret from a ghost. I stood alone in my grandmother's sunroom, the late afternoon light glinting off the cherrywood desk. The name on the front, Mr. Alistair Finch, meant nothing to me. Her lawyer had always been old Mr. Grayson in town. Who was this? And why had she hidden a letter to him in a secret drawer only I would find? Delivering it felt like stepping off a cliff. I had no way of knowing that this single piece of paper was a detonator, and I was about to hand it to the one person who knew how to push the button. The game wasn't over. My grandmother had just passed me the controller. I didn't open it. The instruction, upon my death, was clear, and my grandmother had trusted me with a specific task, not with its contents. The ethical weight of it, combined with the burning need to know, was agony. I found Alistair Finch with a quick online search. His law firm, Finch and Sterling, was in the city, a 2-hour drive away. It specialized in estate law and asset protection. The website was sleek, professional, and intimidating. This wasn't the hometown practice of Mr. Grayson. This was a different league entirely. I called, my voice unsteady, and asked for an appointment regarding the estate of Eleanor Jameson. The receptionist, after a brief hold, informed me that Mr. Finch had been expecting my call. My blood ran cold, expecting it. I drove to the city the next morning, the sealed envelope burning a hole in my bag. His office was all quiet power, thick carpets, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal volumes, a view of the financial district. Alistair Finch was a man in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of immense patience. He didn't smile as he gestured for me to sit. "Miss Jameson," he said, his voice a calm, measured baritone. "I was very sorry to hear about Eleanor. She was a remarkable woman. And I must admit, I've been waiting for this day with some apprehension." He held out his hand. "You have something for me." Wordlessly, I took the envelope from my bag and placed it on the vast, empty desk between us. He didn't pick it up immediately. He looked at me, his gaze assessing. "You haven't opened it. It wasn't addressed to me." A faint, approving nod. "Eleanor said you were the one with integrity. She was counting on that." Finally, he picked up a letter opener, slit the envelope with a precise motion, and extracted a single sheet of paper. He read it, his expression inscrutable. The silence stretched. Then he let out a long, slow breath, almost a sigh. "It's time." "Time for what?" I asked, my heart hammering. "To execute the second will," he said, looking at me directly. The words hung in the air. The second will. Sarah's offhand comment, my desperate hope, it was real. "There's another one?" My voice was a whisper. "There is. Dated and executed 6 months after the will your father read. It supersedes the prior document entirely. I am its sole executor." He leaned forward. "Your grandmother came to me 2 years ago. She was concerned, deeply concerned. She believed her son, your father, was under the undue influence of your brother, Michael. That they were financially pressuring her, making plans for her money that did not align with her wishes. She felt isolated. The will she had with Mr. Grayson, the one your father has, was drafted during a period of that pressure. She described signing it as a moment of profound weakness, a desire for familial peace that she immediately regretted." I felt dizzy. The narrative of my family, the story they'd built, was crumbling with every word he spoke. "She instructed me to draft a new will," Finch continued. "Her true will. But she was adamant it remained secret until after her death. She feared confrontation, feared the vitriol it would unleash while she was alive. She also needed to be sure. She needed a test." "A test," I echoed. "The first will, the one your father has, was the test," Finch said, his tone grave. "She called it the reveal. She wanted to see what they would do. Would they treat you fairly despite the document? Would your father, as executor, question its stark unfairness? Or would they follow the letter of a law that gave them everything they wanted and simply erase you?" He paused, letting the cruel accuracy of it sink in. "You are now aware of their choice." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of vindication so potent it was physically painful. She had seen them. She had known. "The second will," I managed to say. "What does it say?" Finch didn't reach for another document. Instead, he recited its core tenet from memory. The entirety of the residuary estate, the house, the investments, the liquid assets, is placed into a structured trust. You, Clara, are the sole beneficiary of that trust. The trust releases funds to you for specific, outlined purposes: education, home purchase, healthcare, and entrepreneurial ventures. It is designed not to hand you a fortune, but to build you a foundation. The room seemed to tilt. "And Michael?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Michael is left a specific, one-time lump sum. A meaningful amount, but a fraction of the estate's total value. The amount is exactly equal to the sum your grandmother believed your father had already indirectly transferred to him over the years for his house and education, what she called the advance on his inheritance. It was breathtakingly fair. And it was a devastating indictment. And my parents?" My voice was small. "Your father is removed as executor for obvious conflict of interest. He is left a series of personal, sentimental items. Your mother is left a separate jewelry collection." Finch finally opened a drawer and produced a thick, bound document. This is it. The true last will and testament of Eleanor V. Jameson. My first duty as executor is to formally notify all beneficiaries and the previous executor, your father, of its existence. The notification letters go out today. The seismic shift was happening in real time. What happens now? Now, Finch said, placing his palms flat on the desk, there is a period of legal transition. Your father will, in all likelihood, contest this will. He will claim undue influence, specifically from me, or possibly from you. He will claim your grandmother was not of sound mind when she signed it. It will become adversarial. Are you prepared for that, Clara? This will mean open war within your family. I thought of my father's hardened face, of Michael's suppressed smirk. I thought of the cherrywood desk. I thought of my grandmother, hiding a letter in a secret drawer, trusting me to see it through. The fear was there, a cold knot in my stomach. But beneath it was a solid, unshakable bedrock of righteousness. I'm prepared, I said, and for the first time in weeks, I believed it. The letters went out by certified mail that afternoon. I stayed in the city, too keyed up to drive home. I booked a hotel room and waited for the storm to break. It didn't take long. My phone started buzzing just after 7 p.m. First, a text from my mother. Clara, what have you done? Then, a missed call from my father. Then another. Then a string of escalating, furious texts from Michael, culminating in one that read, You conniving ****, you won't get away with this. I didn't answer. I just sat by the window, watching the city lights come on, holding my phone as it vibrated with the sound of a family imploding. The silence from my grandmother's house was over. So, what do you think happens next? How does a father react when his authority and his favorite son's fortune is legally stripped away? Do you think they'll fight dirty? Let me know your predictions below. Part 3 is where the legal threats start flying and the true condition of my grandmother's final wish is revealed.
Subscribe now.
The voicemail from my father's lawyer was curt and ice cold. Ms. Jameson, this is Robert Vance, representing your father, Charles Jameson. We are in receipt of the purported second will. We intend to file a motion to contest it in probate court immediately on grounds of undue influence and testamentary incapacity. We demand you voluntarily disavow this document and agree to the valid prior will to avoid a prolonged and public legal battle that will only diminish the estate for everyone. It was a threat, pure and simple. But what they didn't know, what Mr. Finch had saved for this exact moment, was that my grandmother hadn't just written a new will. She'd built a fortress around it. And the key to that fortress wasn't a legal argument. It was a single, devastating condition hidden in its core. My father didn't call me himself. The lawyer's message was his declaration of war. I forwarded it immediately to Alistair Finch. His response was a single line. Proceed as discussed. Do not engage. The next 48 hours were a vacuum of silence for my family, but I could feel the furious energy gathering on the other side. I imagined the meetings, the frantic calls to their own attorneys, the rewriting of their narrative to paint me as a manipulative granddaughter who'd preyed on a confused old woman. Finch called me for a strategy session. The challenge is predictable, he explained, his voice calm through the speakerphone. They will attack on 2 fronts. First, testamentary capacity. They will gather statements from doctors, from friends, suggesting Eleanor was declining, forgetful, easily swayed in her final years. Second, undue influence. They will try to prove that you, or I, manipulated her into changing her estate plan against her true wishes. They will subpoena your financial records, looking for desperation. They will scrutinize every visit, every phone call. But we have the later will, I said, anxiety tightening my chest. That should be enough, right? In a straightforward case, yes. A later will revokes an earlier one. But when families fight, nothing is straightforward. They will try to create enough doubt about her state of mind that a judge might invalidate the second will, leaving the first, the one that benefits them, as the only valid document. It's a common, ugly tactic. He let that hang for a moment. Which is why, he continued, your grandmother was several steps ahead. She wasn't just drafting a will. She was creating evidence. She recorded a video affidavit with me 6 months before she died. In it, she is lucid, detailed, and explicitly states her reasons for disinheriting Michael from the bulk of the estate and removing your father as executor. She names the pressure they exerted. She explains the advance on inheritance calculation. It is compelling evidence of her capacity and intent. A wave of relief washed over me. So we show them the video, and they back down. Finch's tone grew even more serious. It's not that simple, Clara. Releasing that video would be a nuclear option. It would permanently sever your family. It would publicly humiliate your father and brother. Your grandmother provided it as a shield of last resort. She hoped it wouldn't be needed. She hoped the mere existence of the second will would make them see reason, accept the new distribution, and avoid a fight. Her primary goal wasn't to punish them, but to provide for you justly. The video is the stick. But she also left a carrot. A condition. This was new. A condition? In the will? Not in the standard clauses, Finch said. It's a conditional codicil. An addendum that activates only if the will is contested by a named party, in this case, your father or brother. They've just triggered it. I could hear him shuffling papers. The condition is this: if any beneficiary named in the first will, specifically Michael or your father, initiates a formal legal challenge to the validity of the second will, then any and all bequests to them in the second will are immediately and irrevocably revoked. The sheer, elegant brutality of it took my breath away. You mean if they fight it? If they file that motion to contest, Finch finished, Michael loses his lump sum. Your father loses his sentimental items. They get nothing. Not a penny. The entire estate, by the terms of their own challenge, would flow solely to you. They would be legally disinherited for challenging her true wishes. It was a masterpiece of psychological and legal strategy. My grandmother wasn't just rewarding me, she was testing them one final, ultimate time. She was saying, if you accept my fair judgment, you will be provided for. If you greedily fight for more, you will prove your character and lose everything. Do they know about this condition? I asked, my mind reeling. It was included in the packet I sent them, Finch replied. Buried on page 28 of the will. Most people, especially angry ones, don't read every line of a legal document they intend to fight. Their lawyer should have caught it and advised them of the catastrophic risk. The fact that we've received a threat and not a request for clarification suggests either their lawyer is incompetent, or your father and brother are so arrogantly confident or so furious that they've ignored the warning. He was giving them a chance to step back from the cliff, even now. By making the threat, they'd activated the condition, but the actual filing of court papers would be the point of no return. The next communication came not from a lawyer, but from my mother. She asked to meet alone. I agreed, against Finch's advice, at a neutral coffee shop. She looked aged, her eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. There was no greeting. You have to stop this, Clara, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Your father is beside himself. Michael is talking about legal fees he can't afford. This video they're talking about, it will destroy us. There wouldn't be a video if they weren't trying to destroy me, I said, keeping my voice low. Mom, did you read the new will? Did you see the condition? She waved a hand, dismissive. That's just legal scare tactics. Your grandmother would never have written that. She loved Michael. She did love him, I said, feeling a surge of frustration. That's why she left him money, an amount equal to everything he'd already gotten. But the first will, the one Dad has, it wasn't her. She felt pressured. She regretted it. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of anger, not understanding. You're rewriting history because you're jealous, Clara. You always have been. Now you've found some lawyer to help you steal from your own family. If you proceed, you will have no family left. Her words were a lance through my heart. The ultimate threat, the one she knew would hurt the most. I looked at her, This woman who had stood by and watched me be erased, and now blamed me for refusing to disappear. The condition is real, Mom, I said, my voice hollow. If Dad and Michael file in court, they get nothing. Not the lump sum. Not Dad's things. Nothing. Tell them to read page 28. Tell them to call their lawyer and actually listen. I left her sitting there, her untouched coffee cooling on the table. I had delivered the warning. The ball was in their court. The condition was now the ticking clock on the entire conflict. Would their greed outweigh their caution? Or would the fear of total loss finally make them see reason? 2 days later, the answer came. It wasn't a phone call or an email. It was a formal notice, delivered by a process server to Alistair Finch's office. I was at my apartment when Finch called. His voice was grim. They filed, he said. Charles and Michael Jameson have jointly petitioned the probate court to invalidate the second will. The motion is 12 pages long. It alleges I conspired with you to isolate and manipulate a vulnerable Eleanor. It's aggressive and, under the terms of her codicil, catastrophically stupid. I sank onto my couch, the finality of it hitting me. They had called my grandmother's bluff. They had chosen the fight. And in doing so, they had triggered the very mechanism that would annihilate their claim. What does this mean, exactly? I asked, my mouth dry. It means, Finch said, a note of solemn finality in his tone, that by the authority granted to me as executor under the conditional codicil, I am now obligated to strike the bequests to Charles and Michael Jameson from the estate plan. Legally, as of this filing, they are no longer beneficiaries. The estate, in its entirety, passes to you, via the trust. The war is over before their first shot even lands in court. The silence that followed was profound. They had played themselves. So, what happens now? Do you think my father and brother will realize what they've done when they get the legal notice that they've been completely cut out? Or will they push forward, blinded by rage, into a battle they cannot win? Share your thoughts in the comments. In part 4, we see the fallout, and I'm faced with the most difficult decision of all: what to do with a victory that feels like ashes. Subscribe for the emotional climax. My brother's reaction to being completely disinherited wasn't delivered through a lawyer. It came in the form of a brick hurled through the living room window of my apartment at 3 a.m. The crash of glass was followed by the roar of his car speeding away. Sitting in the dark, surrounded by shards, the police report in my hand, I understood the final veil had dropped. This was no longer about law or money. It was about identity. My family story, the one where I was the afterthought, had been legally erased, and the characters in that story were now fully, violently unhinged. Winning had just made me a target. The formal notice from Alistair Finch's office to my father and brother's lawyer was a masterpiece of cold, legal finality. It cited the specific conditional codicil, referenced their filed petition as the triggering event, and informed them that, per the testator's instructions, all bequests to them were now void. They were to have no further claim on the estate of Eleanor Jameson. A copy was sent to the probate court, effectively neutering their own lawsuit before it could begin. The response was not a legal one. It was primal. First came the barrage of furious, rambling emails from my father, subject lines in all caps. Traitor, you've killed your family. How could you let this happen? He blamed me for hiding the condition, for tricking them into filing. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. He, the executor who'd hidden the existence of a fairer will, was accusing me of hiding clauses. He had orchestrated the reading of a document that wrote me out, and now he was the victim of unfair exclusion. Michael brick through my window was the physical escalation. The police were sympathetic but clear. Without a witness willing to testify it was him, it was just vandalism. They increased patrols past my building. I spent the night at a friend's, shaking not from fear, but from a deep, soul-weary sadness. The boy I'd looked up to, my big brother, was now a man capable of terrorizing me. The next morning I had a new email. This one was from my mother. It was short. Your father has had chest pains. He's at the hospital for observation. Are you happy now? It was a masterstroke of emotional manipulation, designed to bypass logic and strike directly at the guilt she believed I must feel. I called the hospital directly, posing as a family member. The nurse in the cardiac unit confirmed a Charles Jameson had been admitted overnight for evaluation of stress-induced hypertension. He was stable. It wasn't a heart attack, but it was real. The weight of their choices was literally making him sick, and they were laying the cause, like a corpse at my feet. Alistair Finch advised complete disengagement. Do not respond to the emails. The police report is filed. The legal matter is closed. Any communication should go through me. They are attempting to draw you into an emotional conflict because they have lost the legal one. But it wasn't that simple. This was my family. The cultural script, the biological pull, the lifetime of conditioning, it all screamed that I should fix this, that I was responsible for the fracture. Had my grandmother, in her quest for justice, underestimated the toxic bond she was asking me to sever? I wrestled with it for days, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound outside my now boarded-up window. The breaking point came when I got a call from my cousin Lisa, someone I'd always been close to. "Clara, I just had the most awful conversation with your dad," she said, her voice thick with distress. "He's telling everyone that you and some slick city lawyer conspired to cut him and Mike out. He's saying Grandma had dementia, that you took advantage. He's poisoning the whole family against you." I don't know what to believe. That was the true cost. The isolation wasn't just from my immediate family, it was spreading. My reputation within my entire extended family and social circle was being systematically destroyed. My victory in probate court was turning into a social death sentence. I had the money, the house, the legal win, and I was utterly alone. I went for long, aimless walks, my grandmother's words echoing. The ledger always balances. But this didn't feel like balance. It felt like mutually assured destruction. She had given me a fortress of financial security, but she'd placed it in the middle of an emotional scorched earth. Was this what she wanted? For me to be right, and rich, and completely isolated? I found myself driving to her house, my house now. The lockbox from the realtor was on the door, but Finch had given me the code. I let myself in. The silence was different now, no longer peaceful, but heavy with the echoes of the last family gathering here, the reading of the first will. I walked to the sunroom, to the cherrywood desk. I opened the hidden compartment again. It was empty, of course. But sitting there, in the same sunlight where we'd watched birds, I felt a desperate need for one more piece of her wisdom, one more clue. And then I remembered. The desk itself. She'd left it to me in the first will, the decoy. She knew I would get it regardless of which document was followed. She knew I would find the secret compartment. What if there was more? I began a methodical, desperate search. I took out every drawer, felt along every seam. I checked for false bottoms, for hollow legs. Nothing. Defeated, I slumped into her armchair. My eye fell on the bookshelf across the room, filled with her beloved birdwatching guides and nature journals. I walked over, my fingers trailing over the spines. One volume, a thick, weathered guide to North American songbirds, felt different. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I opened it. The pages had been hollowed out, creating a secret niche. And inside that niche was a simple, unsealed note card. In her handwriting, it was addressed to me. My hands trembled as I read it. "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, the difficult game is underway. I am so sorry for the pain it will cause you. I saw their hearts, and I feared this path. Know this, the condition is not about punishment. It is about truth. A tree that will not grow straight must be pruned, not for spite, but for the health of the forest. You are the straight, strong tree. The money is not a prize for winning a fight. It is soil for you to grow in. Do not let their noise convince you to wither. Use it to build a family of your own choosing, one that sees your worth without being forced. I loved them, but I trust you. Always, Grandma." I cried then, deep, heaving sobs of release, clutching the note card to my chest. She had known. She had foreseen the isolation, the character assassination, the guilt. And she was telling me it was okay. The purpose of the condition wasn't to make me rich while they suffered. It was to force the truth into the open so I could be free of them. The pruning was brutal, but she believed I was strong enough to grow anew in the sunlight it let in. The ledger wasn't balancing money, it was balancing truth against lies. And for the first time, I felt the weight shift. The loneliness was still there, but it was no longer a sentence. It was a cleared field. I left the house with a note card in my pocket, a tangible piece of her grace. When I got home, there was a new email from my father's lawyer, Robert Vance. The tone had changed dramatically. It was no longer aggressive. It was cautious. Given the development regarding the conditional codicil, and upon further review and consultation with my clients, they are willing to withdraw their petition to contest the will. We would like to discuss a potential settlement to avoid further litigation and familial discord. They had finally read page 28. They had finally understood they were fighting for a share of nothing. The threat of total loss had cut through the fury. They were waving the white flag. But it was too late for a simple retreat. The codicil had been triggered. By law, they were already out. Any settlement would now be an act of mercy from me. The power had irrevocably shifted. So, what would you do? With the legal victory absolute and your grandmother's blessing in your pocket, would you show mercy and give them something? Or would you enforce the letter of her will, the condition they themselves activated? The final decision is next. Subscribe for part 5. The email from the lawyer used words like settlement and familial discord, but I heard the real meaning underneath. Surrender. My father and brother, faced with the abyss of getting absolutely nothing, had finally blinked. The chest pains, the brick, the smear campaign, it had all been the furious thrashing of people who believed they were entitled to a fortune. Now, they were just beggars at the gate of an estate they had legally disqualified themselves from. And I was the gatekeeper. The power was absolute, and it tasted nothing like victory. It tasted like responsibility. My grandmother's note in my pocket didn't tell me what to do. It just told me I was strong enough to choose. So, what do you do when you win the war you never wanted to fight? I didn't reply to the lawyer's email. I forwarded it to Alistair Finch and asked for his counsel, not as my lawyer, but as the man who had known my grandmother's mind better than anyone. He came to my apartment, now with a temporary plexiglass window, and sat across from me with the weary air of a man who has seen this story before. Legally, you owe them nothing, he said, his voice gentle but firm. The conditional codicil is ironclad. Their filing triggered it. The court will almost certainly uphold it. You can ignore their request, allow the probate to proceed solely in your favor, and that will be the end of it. They have no leverage. And morally? I asked, the word feeling small in the large, empty space of my new reality. Finch sighed, steepling his fingers. Eleanor's primary goal, as she expressed it to me, was your protection and your future. The condition was a deterrent, a final test of character. She hoped they would pass. They failed. Enforcing it is simply executing her clear, documented wish. There is no moral ambiguity there. But the note, I said, pulling the note card from my pocket and handing it to him. He read it slowly, his expression softening. Ah, he said softly. She left you an escape hatch. Not from the law, but from the bitterness. He handed it back. She's telling you that the purpose of the money is to build, not to hoard. That your well-being is more important than punitive justice. She's giving you permission to be the bigger person, but only if it serves you. That was the key. If it serves you. Any act of mercy couldn't be for them, to buy a love or a peace that didn't exist. It had to be for me, to close a chapter without a festering wound, to prove to myself I wasn't them. I thought for a long time. I thought about my father in a hospital bed, sick with his own choices. I thought of Michael's explosive, cowardly anger. I thought of my mother, trapped in the middle, choosing her husband's narrative over her daughter's truth. And I thought of my grandmother, watching birds, knowing the ugly capacities of the people she loved, and still trying to guide us towards something better. I want to make an offer, I said finally, my voice finding a solid ground it hadn't had in months. But not through their lawyer. I want to say it to their faces. One last time. Finch looked at me with deep concern. Clara, that is highly inadvisable. It will be emotionally charged. They could use it against you. I'll have you there, I said. And it won't be a negotiation. It will be a statement. They need to hear it from me, and I think I need to say it to them. A meeting was arranged under strict conditions in Finch's conference room. My father, Michael, and their lawyer, Robert Vance, sat on one side. Finch and I sat on the other. My father looked older, diminished, his anger now a cold, hard resentment. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes, staring at the polished tabletop, his jaw clenched. Vance began with a rehearsed speech about putting the family first, finding an amicable solution. I held up a hand, cutting him off. I looked directly at my father. You tried to erase me, I said, my voice not rising, but filling the quiet room. You presented a document that said I was worth a desk. You didn't question it. You enforced it. Grandma left a second will to correct that injustice, and your response was to try and destroy it and me in court. In doing so, you triggered the clause that cuts you out. Legally, you get nothing. That is the consequence of the action you chose. My father's face flushed, but he said nothing. I turned to Michael. You threw a brick through my window. You terrorized me. You felt so entitled to money you hadn't earned that you tried to intimidate me into giving up what was mine. He shifted in his seat, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Grandmother saw this in you. I continued. That's why she wrote the condition. It wasn't a trap. It was a final chance to choose fairness over greed. You chose greed. I took a breath, the note card a secret warmth in my pocket. But her last message to me wasn't about revenge. It was about building a life. And holding on to this bitterness, fighting over every last dollar. That doesn't build anything. It just continues the war. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a brief, drafted by Finch. This is not a settlement of the will. The will stands. You are not beneficiaries. This is a personal, one-time gift from me, Clara Jameson, to you. It is equal to the lump sum Michael was originally left in the second will. You can split it however you want. In exchange, you both sign a binding release, agreeing never to challenge the estate again, never to contact me directly for any reason except a genuine family emergency, and to cease all defamatory statements about me or Alastair Finch. The room was utterly still. My father scanned the document, his eyes widening at the number. It was still life-changing money, just not empire-building money. This is a charity, Michael spat, finally looking up, his eyes burning with humiliation. Yes, I said simply. It is. It's my charity. A gift you did not earn and do not deserve. You can take it, sign the papers, and we go our separate ways. Or you can reject it, walk away with nothing, and we will see each other only in court, where I will enforce Grandma's will to the letter and introduce her video affidavit into the public record. The choice is yours. It was the ultimate twist. I was giving them the money, but I was framing it not as their right, but as my choice. I was robbing them of the narrative of winning or even compromising. They were accepting alms. It was a deeper humiliation than being cut out, and they knew it. But the alternative was total public destruction. My father's shoulders slumped, the last of his defiant energy draining away. He looked old and broken. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, at his lawyer. Vance let out a long, slow breath. We need to review the release. They signed the papers a week later. The money was transferred. I heard through the family grapevine that Michael and his family moved out of state. My parents stayed in their house, quieter, largely withdrawn from the extended family circles they'd once dominated. The probate closed. The house, the investments, the quiet security of the trust, all were mine. I sold my grandmother's house. It held too many ghosts. I used a portion of the trust to buy a smaller, sun-filled place with a room I turned into a studio. I used another portion to fully fund the nature education nonprofit I'd always dreamed of starting, naming it the Eleanor Foundation. The ledger, in her strange, fierce way, had balanced. The real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the brutal, painful clarity. My grandmother's second will didn't just reveal a hidden clause, it revealed hidden hearts. It forced the unspoken dynamics into the light, where they could no longer be ignored. She gave me the financial means to walk away, and the emotional permission to do so. So, what's the takeaway? It's not about hiding clauses in wills. It's about the courage to see people for who they are, not who you wish they were. And it's about understanding that sometimes fairness has to be architected, protected by law, because it won't be given freely, even by those who are supposed to love you most. Have you ever had a relationship where the true dynamic was hidden, only to be revealed in a moment of crisis? Share your story of clarity in the comments below. I read everyone. And if this story of quiet strength and engineered justice resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to redraw the boundaries of your own life. Thanks for listening.